It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was an age of wisdom. It was an age of foolishness. It was the season of light. It was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope. It was the winter of despair. Wait a minute. Something's not right. I thought I was supposed to do sit-down tragedy. But it was stand-up comedy. I don't know about you, but I get everything mixed up. I don't know whether I'm coming or going. I get letters mixed up, and that's maybe why I'm so devoted to dog. Okay, now let's get to the truth of the matter. How many of you have had your life work out exactly as you intended? I found that everything just gets mixed up. I shoot an arrow right, and it goes left. I climb up to the peak. I end up in the mud. So, what are we going to do? It really is a tale of two cities. That was the opening lines at the beginning of our adventure from Charles Dickens' Tale of Two Cities, where he found that we are living in these two worlds all the time. It's just two worlds. We're working on our inner level. We're working on our outer level. We're working on our peace and centeredness inside. We are working on the chaos that takes us in all directions. Where can we go? Where do you go? How does this translate into your personal life? Maybe you found that you're working on all that career drive that takes you out into the world, and that's a big challenge to the intimacy in your relationships. Maybe you feel like the creative energy that just wants to bubble out of you is challenged by all your obligations to your family. How are you pulled in your life? Where do you go? How do you resolve that? I think we need to talk to Rumi about this, because he found all that pulling and churning and chafing inside of us are all those divergent desires pulling in opposite directions. Disease comes and we fall out of harmony. We're like the four birds, each with their legs attached to each other. We're a flopping bouquet of birds. Death comes and they fly off. But before that, their pulling is our pain. Consider how the soul must feel with that exalted pull inside of ourselves. So now, I'll ask again, where do we go from here? I think it's time for a hero's journey. I think we need to go way back to the succession of heroes who have gone before us. We can go back to that place where the archetypes are formed. That's really where the hero's journey goes to. I invoke Arjuna, one of the greatest heroes, the hero of the Bhagavad Gita, which is just one chapter in the great Indian epic, the Mahabharata. Now here he was, one of the greatest heroes of his time, fully developed on every level. And even he, much less us, was standing with this incredible challenge between irreconcilable opposites. Because on the one hand, well, I got to back up. There was this huge war ensuing, a world war. All the forces of good and evil had been assembled on this battlefield. And there were the two sides. His family, his own cousins, had usurped the power of the kingdom for their own ends and their evil designs to take over the world by force, conquest, destruction. And on the other hand, there was his own kinsman, who upheld the values of truth and justice, Dharma. There he was in suspension between love and Dharma, between love and Dharma, between love and Dharma. Whew. That's a primordial opposite. And he felt that as he stood on the battlefield in suspension. He could not move. He could not move it. And then the bow fell from his hand. I will not fight. And then a lesson unfolded for him. He was lucky to have Krishna as his charioteer, who began to unfold this truth on a deeper level of life. And the message he gave them, which happened slowly, in time, actually quite short, it was very simple. Transcend. Go within. Go beyond the pairs of opposites. Go beyond the attractions and aversions in our life. There's a place of deep stillness, a place of deep centeredness, a place within. Transcend. There's a beautiful Vedic word for it called Nivartatvam. I just love the sound of it. Nivartatvam. Say it again. Nivartatvam. Say it again. Nivartatvam. Transcend, go within. One opposite value. Another opposite value comes up. And then we have to go within to come out to some deeper level of something that somehow embraces these irreconcilable opposites into some deeper level of wholeness. But how do we navigate this in our regular life? Most of us try to find that elusive balance. It's like walking a tightrope between two worlds. It's like trying to find this impossible balance. If we could just kind of manage our life and all our busyness, and we can get our relationships working, and we can make some money, and all we're doing is trying to find this balance, and you know what? It doesn't work. Because every good mover knows that real balance comes from that moment of suspension and fall. It's suspend and fall, suspend and fall. It's a rhythm between two sides. It's this complementary rhythm that swings back and forth. It's not like we can do just one thing and then the other thing. We swing back and forth. That's how this rhythm starts between these two worlds. And what I'm saying to you now is don't give up your desires. Don't choose one desire and say, oh, okay, no, my work is the most important, and you give up relationship. Don't just give up relationship and let go of work. We hold a dynamic tension. That's the secret. Holding a dynamic tension between these two worlds. And in that, we find a rhythm that forces us, takes us to that moment like Arjuna on the battlefield when he's in suspension. It's called the yoga of desperation. You transcend to a deeper level of synthesis. And that's when your movement begins to rise and fall and rise and fall, rise, fall. An integration happens, something deeper. And you know what? Maybe this is the way it's supposed to be. Maybe this is the way life works, because everyone sees these opposites that pull them apart as like, if I could just get over that problem, if I could just say, okay, I can just somehow, like we said, go to that balance that we were talking about. But what I've learned from working with a lot of people and seeing deep inside now myself and others is that this play of opposites is the way that nature, it's the way that dynamic forces of the universe seem to work, both on the big macroscopic level and also deep on an internal level. If that's the way it is, why keep fighting it? There's a lot to be gained by beginning to accept that that is the process and finding that swing between these two worlds. Because like Count Basie said, if it don't mean a thing, what did he say? If it don't mean a thing, if it ain't got that swing, you're swinging between two worlds. That's the way you're learning and growing. You know why? A very wise man, one of the wisest men, told me once that enlightenment is the coexistence of opposite values. Enlightenment is the coexistence of opposite values. That's the primordial opposites. Because enlightenment, people talk about that absolute fullness of the self, pure consciousness, full awareness. And the other extreme of that is the relative, the ever-changing. We have the non-changing and we have the ever-changing. That's a primordial opposite. That's really hard to integrate, to have the fullness of our being at every moment in our daily life. That's a big challenge. So don't you think that in this design that we might be learning in steps, baby steps, We have to integrate our desires for peace with, what's the opposite of peace? The chaos. We have to integrate basically all our divergent desires. That's where the magic begins to unfold. We have to find some deeper place that we can go to, that somehow, each time we do it, we're integrating this value and that value and this value and that value. And in that, we're growing. This is the name of the game. This is the way our evolution unfolds. This is the evolutionary process. I'm inviting you to look at your evolutionary process in an entirely new way. One where it's the very nature of the thing to embrace opposite values. And the bigger the opposite value, the bigger the challenge, the more irreconcilable that these values are, the more evolution that's in store for you. Like Arjuna on the battlefield, in this incredible play of opposites, which was, it's extraordinary what he had to go through to think of killing his own family members, because what could be gained by that act? But at the same time, he knew that there was a certain level of righteousness, of dharma, that had to be upheld on earth at that time. Otherwise, the world would lapse into barbarism. He did come out and fight. But he fought in a completely new way, where he was transcended that field of action in an entirely new way of synthesis that really, where he was not gripped, he was not pulled in the same way. He had established a deeper level of wholeness in himself. So I invite each of you to start looking for opportunities to find these values, embrace these divergent qualities, embrace these forces which are pulling you apart like a flopping bouquet of birds, and see what steps of integration that can unfold within you. And perhaps the best way to close once again on this is by making room for Rumi once again. I don't want to do it with my own paraphrase. I want to give you Rumi's exact words. This is my favorite poem of Rumi's of all time. It's called Desire and the Importance of Failing. God fixes a passionate desire in you and then disappoints you. God does that 100 times. God breaks the wings of one intention and then gives you another, cuts the rope of contriving, so you remember your dependence. But sometimes your plans work out. You feel fulfilled and in control. That's because if you are always failing, you might give up. But remember, it is by failures that lovers stay aware of how they're loved. Failure is the key to the kingdom within. So your true prayers should be, break the legs of what I want to have happen, humiliate my desire, eat me like candy. It's spring. And finally, I have no will.
Yeah.